You think you know Tito Ortiz, the Huntington Beach Bad Boy, one of the first true superstars of the UFC. He was brash, he was loud, he was polarizing, and he helped carry the sport of mixed martial arts out of the shadows and into mainstream culture. But behind the knockout wins, the championships, and the trash talk lies a story far more complicated. What happened after the octagon lights faded? How did Tito's life change forever after UFC? This is the untold, very real journey of Tito Ortiz, filled with battles that had nothing to do with the cage. Tito's rise in the UFC was meteoric. Born Jacob Christopher Ortiz in Huntington Beach, California, his childhood was far from easy. His parents struggled with addiction, and Tito found himself in trouble from an early age. Wrestling became his refuge, a way to escape chaos and channel his energy into discipline. At Cal State Bakersfield and later at Golden West College, he carved out a name for himself as a fierce competitor. But it was his entry into MMA during the late 1990s, when the sport was still considered underground, that turned him into a pioneer. By the early 2000s, Tito Ortiz was the face of the UFC. He won the light heavyweight championship in 2000 and defended it 5 consecutive times, a record at the time. His bleach blonde hair, his bad boy persona, and his willingness to stir controversy made him both loved and hated, but undeniably marketable. His rivalries with fighters like Ken Shamrock and Chuck Liddell weren't just fights. They were spectacles that drew massive attention. But behind the bravado was a man who carried scars from his youth, someone fighting not only opponents in the cage, but his own inner battles. As the UFC grew, so did Tito's conflicts with its leadership. His disputes with UFC President Dana White became legendary, and while some of it made for good drama, it also strained his career. Tito felt underpaid, undervalued, and disrespected, despite being one of the promotion's biggest stars. That tension eventually pushed him away from the UFC, sending him toward rival organizations like Bellator and smaller promotions. While many fighters simply fade into obscurity after leaving the UFC, Tito found ways to stay in the spotlight. But it came at a price. Life after the UFC wasn't just about fighting in new promotions, it was about reinvention. Tito explored acting, business ventures, and politics. He opened a successful gym, Punishment Training Center, and launched his clothing line, Punishment Athletics, which became popular among fight fans. But he also faced setbacks. Financial troubles, lawsuits, and failed ventures were part of his post-UFC journey. Like many athletes who earn fame and money young, the transition into a normal life proved challenging. One of the most dramatic chapters in Tito's life came from his personal relationships. His marriage to former adult film star Jenna Jameson drew massive media attention, and their eventual split was messy, public, and painful. Custody battles over their children became tabloid fodder, and Tito spoke openly about the toll it took on his mental health. While fans knew him as the loud, confident fighter, behind closed doors, he was dealing with heartbreak and the pressures of fatherhood. Those struggles humanized him in ways many never saw. But Tito is not someone who backs down from challenges, inside or outside the cage. In 2017, he shocked the MMA world with a stunning victory over Chael Sonnen in Bellator, proving that even in his 40s, he still had fight left in him. He would later face rival Chuck Liddell once more, this time under Golden Boy Promotions, reigniting an old rivalry even as critics questioned whether either man should still be fighting. Love him or hate him, Tito refused to let others define when his story was over. Beyond fighting, Tito ventured into the world of politics. In 2020, he was elected to the Huntington Beach City Council. a position that again thrust him into the public eye, this time not as a fighter, but as a political figure. His tenure was short and controversial, marked by disputes over COVID-19 policies and public criticism. But it showed yet another side of him, a man unwilling to step away quietly from the spotlight. He has always been someone who thrives in conflict, whether in the cage, in business, or in politics. Today, Tito Ortiz remains a divisive figure. For some, he's a pioneer who helped build the UFC into the powerhouse it is today. For others, he's a controversial personality who often overshadowed his own accomplishments with drama. But one thing is undeniable. His life after UFC has been as turbulent, unpredictable, and fascinating as his fighting career. He has lived with highs and lows, triumphs and failures, but through it all, he's remained unapologetically himself. The story of Tito Ortiz is not simply about a fighter who once held a belt. It's about a man shaped by hardship, driven by pride, and fueled by the need to stay relevant long after the spotlight should have dimmed. His life changed forever after UFC, not just because the fights ended, but because the battles outside the cage proved just as relentless. And maybe that's what makes his story so compelling. The victories, the controversies, the heartbreaks. They all remind us that fighters are more than athletes. They are human beings navigating life with the same struggles as anyone else, just played out on the biggest stages. Tito Ortiz's journey is far from perfect, but it's real. And that's why, decades after his UFC debut, we're still talking about him. If this deep dive into Tito's life after the UFC gave you a new perspective, make sure to drop a like, subscribe for more stories behind the legends, and let us know in the comments. What surprised you most about Tito Ortiz's journey?